Eddie, thank you for inviting me in today. We're in New York City where you're living it up as a sports consultant. Firstly, can you share what that involves and who are some of the clients that you work for?
Yeah, so it's kind of across a whole breadth of industries, really. So I'm working with a Australian software provider, management platform like a SaaS provider. Working with an OTT platform in the US called Willow TV, and also doing some sports sponsorship deals, kind of trying to leverage the Australian and American interest in their respective sports. So don't know really how I fell into the whole kind of consulting piece. I didn't think I'd land this early in my kind of career in that, but it's just been a kind of progression from where I kind of started in my career, and I was fortunate enough to meet the right people at the right time.
When people start out pursuing a career in sport management, progressing to working as a consultant doesn't really have an obvious trajectory. So how did you come to work in this role?
Well, again, I kind of fell into it in a way, and it just kind of went with it, and it felt right, and I got some really good kind of introductions from some people, and just said yes to a lot of meetings. So when I came from the ICC in Dubai, I was there for 5 years, and my wife was working at Emirates. She got a job to move to North America, to the US, and I decided to follow her. Obviously, who wouldn't say no to New York? But at the time, I was like, well, what am I going to do in the US? Cricket's not really a thing, although I knew there were some things going on in the US because I was obviously at the ICC, but I thought I might have to find something else to keep me occupied until something in cricket did eventually happen in the US. And then I kind of found, just kind of, as I said yes to every meeting, met a whole bunch of people, interesting people, and the first kind of consulting piece was in for the Cricket All-Stars event, which is the big Sachin and Warney event in the baseball stadiums in the US, and that kind of opened my whole kind of world up to networking opportunities with major league ballparks, sports agencies, sponsorship opportunities, and brands. And from there, I picked up some work with Pitch International, which is a UK-based sports agency who just started a US office. I picked up some work with Liverpool Football Club as they were trying to enter the US space, so helping with their kind of the US kind of digital strategy, and then kind of picked up some other work with some brands and teams such as Philadelphia 76ers. I helped them a little bit out with leveraging Ben Simmons and their Aussie contingent there, and Brett Brown, trying to help them manage their partnerships there. And now, as I said, I've just started with an Aussie software company called SponServe, which once I saw their platform, I just thought this is, I wish I had this when I was doing sponsorships. And also, with Willow TV, which is an OTT provider. So I've kind of just, hasn't been much strategy, rhyme or reason myself. I've just kind of fell into things. Obviously, I've spoken to the right people. They recommend me to other people. And at the same time, I've only chosen kind of properties or brands or things that interest me, whether it be cricket, Willow, Cricket All-Stars, whether it be software as a service and sponsorship with SponServe, or whether it be just trying to help teams or brands out with trying to leverage their sponsorship in the space that I'm comfortable with. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride, but like really enjoyable.
Going a long way back now, but what did you do at university?
So I did sports management and law at the University of Canberra. I always wanted to work in sport. I've just been, you probably know yourself. You just know what you want to do when you're a pretty young kid. And I always wanted to work in sport. A lot of people don't know until they're kind of already hit their careers. So yeah, University of Canberra, sports management and law. I did the law piece mainly to get a heads up over other potential candidates who would also have a sports management degree, because I just thought that would give me an extra incentive or opportunity to go further in my career. So yeah, that's kind of where I started. It took me a while to do. It took me about 8 years because I went overseas and travelled a fair bit, and that's probably one of the reasons why I moved to Dubai and now I'm in New York, is that I always had that itch to travel and to work and live overseas as well. So I think those two things complemented each other quite well and got to where I am now.
You specialise in commercial and digital strategy. Are these things that you learnt about at university?
Not really, because I was at university kind of 2001 to 2008, and digital stuff was just on the rise, maybe at the back end. But that was when I was finishing my law degree. But I've always been kind of interested in kind of the software digital space. So it hasn't really been a direct, okay, I have to work in this space right now. But that's probably a career decision that people like yourself might make now, because that is it's just taking off, as we said earlier. There's the rights and for digital has gone through the roof, and there's so much opportunity there to take advantage of that. But at the time, it was more around working in sports, working in events, working in sponsorship, and then it was a natural kind of progression to get excited and involved in that type of space.
For students who might not get exposure to these areas, what would you recommend they do so they can gain a basic understanding?
Yeah, good question. So I like to not think that you need to be terribly digitally savvy or terribly into like all the different parts of technology. Your standard Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram initially. I think it's more around being interested and reading the specifics of what's going on in the industry and being in the cutting edge of that, and things like sports techie and all these kind of sports innovation lab. There's a whole bunch in the US. You get inundated every day with this is the new thing in sport. This is what you must watch out for. And all the conferences and talks that go on are always spreading this kind of word around. It's the new kind of frontier for sport, and I think sports always kind of led that digital space. For what reason, I'm not really sure, but I think it is that kind of passion and engagement of fans around sport, whereas brands such as clothing brands or food or whatever tend to be more kind of manufactured, whereas in sport you've got a dedicated audience that just wants to lap up content and wants to be communicating within their own groups about what's happening within the sport, what's happening within the teams, what's happening within players. So I think that's why kind of sport is really kind of is really leading that kind of digital charge, and why a lot of brands and people are looking to sport to follow their models about how they best kind of monetize and commercialize their product.
A lot of people will say don't work in sport if you're in it for the money, but does this still apply for consulting?
Yes, to a degree. I mean, I've had a couple of periods where I was like, well, that didn't work out. What am I doing? What's next? So, I mean, I'm very lucky in that my wife's got a steady job, and she's allowed me to go out and kind of work on specific projects that I really felt passionate about. That being said, I think if you are a consultant working particularly in the US, and you are kind of well respected and well liked and have a name out there for doing good work, that can be quite lucrative. I'm yet to see it being terribly lucrative, but certainly on the path, I hope, to that. So look, I think that's, I wouldn't say no, and I'd say particularly people on the younger side of things don't think I'm going to go into sports consultancy, get some experience under your belt. Even now, I wouldn't say I'm terribly experienced to be asking for lucrative sums. So I'd say to these guys, go and learn the craft, learn a specific thing, get known in the industry for being good at one or two specific things, and then you might kind of look at doing that further down the line.
Looking at the sports industry in the future now, where do you think that more jobs are going to start to become available, and what roles do you think are going to become redundant?
Well, I think it's a difficult question in that I think all industries are going to be kind of shaken up a little bit or a lot with implementation of AI and these kind of services are going to affect a whole bunch of industries. Sport is an interesting one in that even just as an aside, I spoke to someone the other day and they said US sports venues, for example, most of them now from the 80s and 90s are kind of coming up to the end of their shelf life. So all these new smart stadiums are now being built. So things like food delivery, seating, big screen activations. That's all going to be taken over by AI or things in front of your face that you can sit or watch when the game's not going on. I think that kind of service industry is not just sport, but other industries is going to be kind of shaken up quite a lot. I think destination venues as being destinations, and having things outside of just a sporting event is going to be kind of a really important part. So having a white elephant out in the field of a stadium just that's used a couple of times a week or once a week is going to be a thing of the past. That's not a good kind of commercial way to do things. So I think having kind of stadiums that are a kind of community hub and have different sports, have food and entertainment complexes within that, and how the service industry and other industries and people adapt to that type of scenario. I think that's kind of fascinates me in a lot of ways, and how sport's going to, I think, lead the charge on that type of thing. So it's almost like entertainment and things like that will have to kind of come across and get in bed with sport, so that it's a kind of one-stop shop for places to go where they know they're going to be entertained.
You've worked in Australia, Dubai, and now New York City. Was it always your plan to work abroad, and what were some of the interview processes like?
I'd say it was. Like I'd never been to Dubai before. I'd been to New York before I came to New York, and said I said to my wife, my girlfriend at the time, I want to live and work here in New York. That was always a dream. And even when I was in Australia, I always thought I want to live and work overseas at some point in my career. And I'm not big about the destiny or whatever, but I think it's almost a manifestation for me. And I've kind of had that throughout my career. I've kind of thought within myself, I want to do this. I want to live and work overseas. I want to live and work in New York. I want to be my own boss in a way. I mean, you've still got to report to people, but I want to have my own thing that I'm happy and comfortable with. I've always kind of had these little kind of thoughts in my own head, and I've been very fortunate, but I've also kind of followed the gut feel of when I thought it was the right time to take the step in order to do that process. I mean, in your second part of the question, the Dubai role was, look, I never thought in a million years when I applied for that job that I would get it. I mean, it was an application. I was in Sydney, I was in Bondi at the time, just saw the jobs. I love cricket, most Aussies do. It was an events role that was just kind of travelling all around the world, running all of the associate and affiliate cricket. And I love travel and I love cricket, and living in Dubai and don't have to pay tax. It was like, oh, okay, there was 3 great things there. Put the application in, and I was told there was over 1,000 applicants, but I was always number one. My former boss said I was always number one, and I was like, why? And he goes, I don't know, you just jumped off the page like you would be the right fit for this. You'd been overseas, you'd worked in the sport, but you also worked on some other interesting things for us. And when the phone call came through, I was actually at a MBA information night in Sydney, because I was thinking about doing my MBA, because I was like, okay, what's next? And I got the call and said, can you move to Dubai in 4 weeks? And I was like, okay, well, this is going to change the trajectory of my career a little bit. So I got taken out to Dubai and did the interview, and that kind of blew my mind about living and working in another place. But the ICC at the time was it's quite Western in a lot of its values, but also kind of got the Middle Eastern subcontinental edge. So there was an interesting kind of lot of interesting kind of cultural questions coming out of that, which I had to answer, because I'd travelled a lot around the world at that time, and also within Australia with the Special Olympics, and being quite close to working a lot with kind of cultural organisations. I think that's kind of what got me over the line, because a lot of the questions were based upon, are you comfortable not feeling comfortable outside of your culture? Because I was at the ICC going into places like Uganda or Hong Kong or parts of Asia, where I was the only ICC representative, and I was working with local communities to help develop their cricket. Now when you're looked at, said you're the governing body of cricket, but you're only one person, and everyone's kind of hanging off your only word to tell you in their kind of language and their culture how to lift cricket up and kind of help their communities. That's a pretty powerful kind of pedestal to be standing on, and trying not to be overwrought in that situation was quite difficult. But fortunately, I think I did a good job, because I was there for 5 years. So,
what advice would you give to anyone looking to make the same move?
have a lot of guts to follow your dream. If you know that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do. And look, it's not easy. You leave, I mean, I've been away from home for 8 years, and there are times when you want to move home for various reasons. You have to sacrifice, friends and family a little bit, which is always difficult. But again, if you know in your heart of hearts, like I did, that I always wanted to kind of live and work overseas in sport, that was one of my goals of my life. I knew I'd have to give certain things away in that respect. I think just follow what you want to do in your heart, and you'll know if it's the right decision. And the great thing is that Aussies are really well respected as great sports administrators all around the world. We just had an Australian consulate night with Australian sport and American sport last year, held by the Australian consulate, and that was the theme that came through. Australians are held in very high esteem when it comes to sports administration, commercialisation, and that kind of thing. So to all the Aussies out there thinking about that, then if you do the right thing, you get involved in the right places, and you make a good name for yourself and do good work, then there are organisations out in Australia and Dubai and the UK and the US who will be looking for you. So,
in the early part of your career, what was the best investment that you made in yourself?
Good question. I think travelling and getting outside my comfort zone early. So I did a gap year in the UK straight after year 12, and that was really hard. I'd never been overseas before, and it was a year in the UK where I was by myself in Warwick, which is in the middle of England, not even in London, and you're 18 years old, and there's times I wanted to go home, but I stuck it out. And when I got back to Australia and started my university career, like I said before, I was itching to work in sport and live overseas. I'd kind of got the itch. So that was I think the best investment was taking myself out of my comfort zone. A lot of people go straight to uni or take a year off and maybe work at a bar or something, which is great. But investing in taking yourself out of your comfort zone when you're young, to build up a bit of a thick skin with that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be traveling overseas. It could be anything, but I think taking yourself out of your comfort zone was kind of really important to me. And then trying a whole bunch of different things. I've never been in a job. 5 years is the longest job I had when I was when I was in Dubai. But other than that, I'd do kind of 6 months, 12 months, kind of just move around, work in different departments. Worked at ACT Cricket, then worked at ASADA, then worked at Special Olympics, then worked at the Sydney World Masters Games, all in different disciplines. So just kind of feel out different parts of sport, understand what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and then and back yourself. Once you've got a big opportunity, like when the ICC came up, back yourself that you can do that, and you can do really well, because you'll come at a point in your kind of young career where this is the job that if I do a good job in, this will springboard the rest of my career.
Looking at US sports versus Australian sports, what do you think it is that US sports do really well that Australian leagues and clubs can learn from?
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty timely question in that I know a lot of the Australian teams and leagues have just been out in the US for the last kind of week, meeting with a whole bunch of US teams and leagues about kind of best practice, and they've been doing that for a while now. And I think it's about this kind of whole entertainment idea. The US, when you go to a sports game, you are entertained from the time you get near the stadium to the time you leave the stadium, if not beforehand. It's a whole kind of entertainment piece. Australia's got really good at that, and look, I can't speak for the Big Bash. I've never actually gone to a game, which is a little bit sad because I'm a cricket guy and an Aussie, and I understand they've done it really well, and they've taken some really good points out of the US kind of sportainment system. But I'd say the US just does it better, and they do it better every single year. The other thing is just kind of reinvention of leagues and teams. and always just trying to, it's always like the valuations of teams and leagues are at an all-time high level, and then they add, you know, a sleeve sponsor, or they, you know, bringing in betting, and then that's going to add layer upon layer of kind of commercial value. Seems like every single year, the teams or the leagues in the US in sport are just adding tiers of value on top of each other, and that's I think about kind of the US capitalist free market system. They're always trying to monetize and commercialize every single aspect of you know, most of the country, really, and that applies to sport. And they've got some extremely savvy business people that they pull in from different kind of disciplines within different industries within the US into the sports atmosphere to drive value. So that's they're probably the main thing, is this like capitalist free market thinking about how can we derive more value from our properties every single year on year. That's the really kind of eye-opening thing for me as an Aussie that I've seen in the US.
And finally, what's been the biggest perk of your job?
Living in New York, it's just amazing city. I mean, I've had a couple of good perks. I mean, look, working at the ICC for 5 years and travelling to some most amazing places, and being the ICC on the ground, as I said, go to Uganda or Italy or Hong Kong or Botswana, and you're representing a global governing body. You are, you know, treated just amazingly well by these people, meeting, you know, prime ministers and presidents, and getting taken into their kind of to their houses and dined and discussed with them. That was just quite an amazing perk when I was at the ICC. And now I'd say it's all of the you know, the tickets that I get and access to sporting events in the US. If I travel to a different part of the US, I've always got someone wherever I'm going to that is there any chance we can get into this game? Any chance we can get into that game? So yeah, my mates are definitely pretty jealous of me of having kind of access to tickets and to numerous sporting events. So that's got to be number one, I think.